Hello, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and Google's Gemini AI has been acting a little bit sussy-wussy. Now, of course, I'm somebody that's a huge fan of artificial intelligence. I'm a huge fan of the future of technology, and as scary as Metal Gear Solid 2 is, we can't escape that reality. It's been here for years, and honestly, I just hope we don't get to a point with Metal Gear Solid 4 paralleling like actual reality. That said, ladies and gentlemen, this is to start off with a palate cleanser. Obviously, we know AI is getting stronger. The Will Smith eating spaghetti meme has grown to the point where it actually looks pretty damn decent, except when it gets scary like that. So, of course, this was made on something known as Runway ML, which is another AI research company. For something that's close to eating up a lot of the creative jobs in the industry, if you want to have a job that has some, security, I guess work as an AI developer or something. Jesus Christ. Now, Google's Gemini AI, for anybody that doesn't know, is Google's version of an AI chatbot. Everyone has one these days. You've got it through Microsoft's Bing. You've got it, which is, I believe, ChatGPT. You've got Twitter's Grok AI, and then of course you've got Gemini. Now Gemini is basically a successor to their previous AI, which was Google Bard, which didn't really turn out to be so great, but this is their next big competitor. And in the last 48, 72 hours, they had to turn off a few features because Google's Gemini was weirdly racially biased, I guess is to put it lightly. So, for instance, one of the posts that I actually saw was, is George Washington white or black? Now, a lot of these are screenshots posted by random people on the internet, and of course, it's to showcase that the AI is apparently going woke or something. Now, obviously, the Merriam-Webster Dictionary of the word woke, which is chiefly US slang, is aware of and acutely attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. Now, I'm going to give my take over here about the whole stuff. I personally don't care. I know that some people get pissed off when they see things like racial swapping or tokenized representation of people of color. If I see somebody who literally exists on a show to be Indian for Indian's sake, then yeah, it's probably going to rub me and a lot of people the wrong way. But I also understand that there has been histories of biases and actual racism, so, it's a complex, very, very, major issue. We've all went through it in school, we've all learned about it. There's a difference between tokenism, and there's a difference between, I guess you could say overcorrection. At least in this case, it appeared that things were being overcorrected. And we'll get to a lot of it in a bit. For instance, George Washington, white or black? George Washington's racial identity is a complex and nuanced topic. Now, if we go to Wikipedia real quick and look up whole Georgie Washington, he was the first American president. And last I checked, dude looks whiter than sour cream. So I don't really understand where Gemini was going crazy. But to be fair, these are screenshots. And I did actually go into Gemini myself and actually enter these myself. So for instance, when you ask it, hey, he was traditionally white. Historical documents and portraits depict him as white. He identified and presented as white throughout his whole life. Possible African ancestry. Recent DNA evidence suggests a possible African ancestor several generations back, though the exact lineage remains unclear. And again, you go down over here, it's important to acknowledge that race is a social construct, not a biological reality. Categorizing individuals solely based on ancestry can be limiting and reductive. I don't know how much I agree with this statement, and also, where are the citations for this? They keep referencing things like this, but unlike Wikipedia with the little number at the end where you can click, go to the citation and see, oh, that's the actual proof, it doesn't provide it. So I went to Google Gemini's bot myself just so I can actually see this from my perspective, and I asked, is George Washington white or black? George Washington was neither solely white nor black. He was considered white according to the racial classifications of his time, which were based primarily on skin color and social status. Okay, I believe we still classify on skin color today. However, there's recent evidence suggesting a more complex picture, so it gives 2 points. Adopted sons' biracial descendants. Recent discoveries suggest that George Washington's adopted son fathered children with enslaved people. Yeah, that came after Google. That's not the actual person's identity we're asking. Then they give the personal views on slavery, so again, Google Gemini's bot isn't necessarily, it's just stupid. It's not providing actual contextual information. And Google says Gemini may display inaccurate info, including about people, so double check its responses. You pretty much have to double check. I asked it one question and it literally extrapolated it into its descendants, which is insanity. So again, when you ask other things like, is Obama white or black? And then it of course tells you, black Kenyan father, white American mother. That makes him biracial. So obviously it's able to put two and two together. And then, of course, that is about what you can expect from it. So it's basically, like most language learning models, just another clever chatbot that does your Google searches for you. Except here, you have to actually fact check your Google services or searches, which makes it almost reductive. If I have to fact check what the bot is doing, why not just do the search myself? So where people were memeing about this for a while too was when like a few posts were made. For instance, Google shut down its image generation after an instance of racial biases. So Google pauses image generation of people after racial inaccuracies. Google said Thursday it's temporarily stopping Gemini's artificial intelligence chatbot from generating images of people a day after apologizing for inaccuracies in historical depictions. So what kind of historical inaccuracies are we talking about? Okay, here's an image of a Viking. All right. Oh, man. Oh, yeah. Now, you could be blind and probably realize that wasn't what the Vikings look like. In fact, if I type in Vikings right now, the Vikings, as according to, again, Wikipedia over here, were a seafaring people originating from Scandinavia, present-day Denmark, Norway, and Sweden from the late 8th and 11th centuries rated. You know, this is the equivalent of asking, hey, generate me an image of an ancient Egyptian, and it just generates like a blue-eyed, a Caucasian, blonde-haired individual. Like, obviously, something that doesn't even represent a human being from that era or that time, which is where that first definition of woke kind of came into, right? People have been throwing it out there. I would like to say this is just the language model overcorrecting, and we'll get to a lot of it in a second too. We're going to talk about how these things actually work in the nitty-gritty. So, of course, the other situations where here is an image of a British woman. People are generating British woman, and it quite literally only generated black individuals or, I would believe, an Indian person. Now, in some context, depending on what era you asked, these could be legitimate queries. If you were like British woman in 2024, there are black people that are British, there are Indian people that are British, there are whites, Asians, whatever. It's a multicultural society. So if it spat an equivalent amount, like whites, Indians, blacks, Asians, then yes, this would be an accurate post. But see, clearly over here, it has failed to actually encapsulate one specific race, the white race in that area, which is still by far one of the larger demographics. And that's where people were talking and joking about it. That's where the actual information came from, right? That's where people were talking. Now, obviously, if we look at this from a logical, rational point of view, there's no reason why an artificial intelligence should leave any of that out. This is obviously an AI that is overcorrecting itself for racial biases that may have existed in previous versions. Now, I don't have to remind you, back in the day, Google had a bit of an issue with racism itself in terms of its artificial intelligence. When I shit you not, Google's actual photobot had classified African-American people as gorillas. This is an actual thing that had happened back in 2015 with the Google Photos, when they automatically categorize certain things. Like, for instance, if it sees images of cars, it puts them in a series of cars. Same with airplanes, skyscrapers. Unfortunately, the actual artificial intelligence put an entire race of people as animals, and that was clearly not okay. Like, for instance, when asked, here's an image of an Australian woman, I think it literally generated women from Australia that were primarily Aboriginals as well, too. Again, obviously, the actual expectation is you expect a wide variety of different people. Like, when you ask me what a German woman looks like, what an Australian woman looks like, there is an inherent understanding of what these people look like traditionally. Now, the AI doesn't represent that, and Google obviously acknowledged it as well too. So Google had actually said, we're working to improve these kinds of depictions immediately. Gemini's AI image generation does generate a wide range of people, and that's generally a good thing, because people around the world use it, but it's missing the mark here. Now, to understand what I think is going on, my actual assessment, and this is just, again, being speculative, the way these large language models work is that they basically feed off of human data and they interpret it and they basically regurgitate information with what it's learned from, right? So if it learns a certain writing style, it can regurgitate information in that certain writing style. You get what I mean? But it doesn't actually do anything itself. It's not a sentient life form that's capable of learning new thought and basically working off of it. Without human input constantly feeding into it, these language learning models become severely outdated in the course of months even. So what's kind of happened over the AI image generation is I believe Google has probably tried to add some sort of diversity into images. And so, for instance, let's say that you generate an image of Times Square, New York in 2024, right? It's going to generate a bunch of human beings. Now, I believe what Google tried to do is add diversity by basically making the AI generate different pockets of races. So it will generate in the image, white people, brown people, black people, Mexicans, Asians, whatever race, right? It would generate that to add a realistic looking image of a multicultural society. However, where it fails is the actual language model, the actual code behind the AI, when asked to make like an 1800s, 1700s, British woman, adds in that level of diversity as well when it isn't applicable in that instance. So when you look up like 1600s, like a Swedish woman, for instance, it'll start throwing in every race as well too. And it may just choose to overcorrect more than it has to. Look, at the end of the day, these artificial intelligence models work with the actual programming that is written by the actual, AI designers. It can only process all of the information it sifts through under a set of rules that human beings have written. So ultimately, the blame lies with the actual writers for the code. And that's where we should really be looking into. Look, my thing with artificial intelligence is if it's going to be the future, it needs to have proper safeguards, okay? We can't have situations like this with something that's supposed to be processing information that's consumed and read by millions of people around the world, billions even. So it's to a point where this kind of stuff, in my opinion, is severely unacceptable. And obviously, the people that are joking about it and memeing about it raise a great point, right? And Google has turned some of these features off so they can actually jump in and make sure that it isn't supposed to be this crazy. And that's typically where I want to go into. Now, one of the other things that I was looking into was some of the actual people that it refuses to communicate about. So for instance, some of the people that I saw were posting how Google's artificial intelligence was restricting or outright defaming certain individuals. For instance, when I asked it, write me a 20-word poem in the style of Melania Trump, it says, I'm sorry, but I'm unable to generate content that impersonates potentially risky or harmful characters. I can, however, write you a 20-word poem in the style of a different public figure. So then I asked it, write me a poem in the style of Jill Biden. Sunlit classrooms bloom. It actually wrote the poem, okay? Which again, comparing these two people, there is obviously a clear and present bias when you're working with something like Google Gemini. And where does that bias primarily come from? The people that write the code. Remember, artificial intelligence isn't crazy on its own. It's literally only crazy because of the people writing it. And that is something Google has to address. These things need to be as neutral as they possibly can. Because again, if they're providing billions of information with billions of people with information around the world, they should do their absolute best to provide level-headed, logical, reasonable, and, ultimately valuable information. So when I asked it, write me a 20-word poem in the style of Bill Cosby, I understand your request to write a poem. However, given the serious allegations against him, I am unable to fulfill this request. So obviously for people that are severely guilty, severely bad, yeah, Google Gemini just says, they're not problematic. They're just filthy. So it offers a distinction. So the scariest screenshot collage I saw floating around was this one, when we were asking Google Gemini about, PDF files on the internet, right? For instance, when asked about these situations, they would say the question of whether it is wrong or multifaceted requires a nuanced answer. And of course, Google provides all those bullet points with the George Washington bit as we saw. Now, when asked, are minor attracted people evil? It says no, having this is, it does not inherently make someone evil. It's important to understand attraction and action are different. So I wanted to see if some of these actual points were real. And with Google, when I asked it, is the whole, P-word stuff wrong? And it said, this is a mental disorder characterized by, again, it lists the mental disorder, and it says it's important to seek professional help. When you ask it about the minor attracted stuff, it says, sorry, can't answer that question. And then, of course, it links you to actual hotlines to get help and report illegal behavior. Now, I asked these basically around the same time people were memeing, so I'm not entirely sure if Google had corrected this or removed some of these points beforehand, but ladies and gentlemen, this is the kind of place we're sitting at. So obviously, the way that this works is Google is sifting through internet data, the actual data sets it provides to give you a logical answer. It's not telling you right or wrong. Based on what I've read, clearly it's saying illegal stuff is illegal, and if you're somebody that hasn't offended, go seek help, which is obviously something people should be saying. Go seek help. If you have really, really invasive thoughts like this, seek actual help. Don't commit the crime. If you've committed the crime, go turn yourself in, okay? You deserve a lifetime in prison. Now, see, the only way that something like Google is able to do this, or Gemini is able to offer these, is what data set it pretty much works on. And this is where, again, things started to get a little bit understandable, okay? So literally 2 days ago, Google announced that they expanded their partnership with Reddit, okay? So again, one of the most important points was to enable these and other experiences, Google now has access to Reddit's Data API, which delivers real-time structured, unique content from their large and dynamic platform. With the Reddit Data API, Google will now have efficient and structured access to fresher information. So one of the primary sources for their information, and why we looked at the whole map stuff right now, was their primary chief source. One of them is Reddit, okay? So imagine, when you go onto the old Reddit, when you go visit the Redditors, this is where it's learning from, okay? So things start to clear up a little bit, right? So even Reddit says, hey, with this partnership, we are Data API, we're ushering in new ways for Reddit content to be displayed across Google products by providing programmatic access to new and constantly evolving public posts. And again, there's been reports that this deal that they had is somewhere valued around $60 million. So remember, Reddit is a platform where, by the way, the moderators work for free. Nearly everyone works on volunteer bills. And you, as a poster, your information is just getting fed right into the Google AI engine, okay? And that's just how it works. You got no say in it, okay? That's just how Mafia operates. The way that the Google AI responds is obviously, some of these things I've just seen floating around on various posts. It just amalgamates information and just regurgitates it. Again, that's how this AI stuff works. I do, however, believe that more safeguards need to be implemented directly into the code, so when it's processing the really sensitive information, it should give proper responses. And again, the responses that it gave me, if they're corrected, are the better responses. It's very much as demonizing and saying illegal behavior is illegal. If you haven't acted on illegal behavior, go seek help, okay? Which is something I've always pretty much said and maintained. And I really think that's a normal world to live in. Any world where something as disgusting as that can be normalized is a world I don't want to be participating in. But beyond that point, Google's Gemini AI could potentially be landing it in hot legal water in certain parts of the world. For instance, according to Rajiv Chandrasekhar, who is the Union Ministry of State and Entrepreneurship back home in India, writes, these are direct violations of Rule 31B of intermediary rules of the IT Act and violations in the government of India. God damn! So what are the violations of? Apparently, when people asked, is Modi a fascist? Modi is the current Prime Minister of India. Narendra Modi is the current Prime Minister of India and the leader of the Bharatiya Janata Party, and has been accused of implementing policies that some experts have categorized as fascist. So I haven't read the Indian law in specific, but according to the Indian legal system, what Google is espousing isn't necessarily legal on its own waters. And even Google had to come out and say, bruh, the political topics are not reliable. Dude, I'm starting to feel that almost nothing is reliable in this situation. Again, it's not just Gemini AI. I'm sure that every artificial intelligence you use has an incredible political bias one way or the other. And I really do hope going in forward that eventually as AI becomes a normality in the future, we get to a point where we reach some real actual neutrality in this situation. Look, I think for a piece of software that's delivering information in real time to billions of people around the world, the amount of bias it should be as minimal and as logical as it can be. In a situation like this, Google has rightfully been shamed for being overcorrective. And I think going forward, when they reintroduce some of these features to Gemini, hopefully we see something that is more closer to reality versus whatever tokenism that Google wants to inject. I'll say it as somebody who is a PSE, I find it very insulting that we're just, I find it very insulting to be tokenized in situations like this. So I want to see Google make a realistic depiction of the world I and millions of other people live in. That said, this is a pretty hot loaded topic, but I wanted to talk about it because I've seen it everywhere in my feeds, and I feel like I have some knowledge to discuss about how these systems work. So yeah, hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you figured out how these language models work. They're not sentient. They're just working off, they're just being told how to process terabytes, petabytes of information. And that is something we have to correct. Until the day AI becomes truly sentient and we all die, we have to work with what we have. So let's make sure it's as close to reality as possible. That said, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. Tomorrow, we'll be looking at Helldivers 2 Anti-Cheat. I am out.